Dream machine, Dicom, HL7, IHE in the snap. We're building the future, never looking back.
Imaging Informatics Unplugged, where we look at the complex world of imaging informatics, and we try to break this down into normal day-to-day conversations. Today we're going to be talking about AI, its use in predictive care, and its use in real-life applications. Now, this is hot off the heels of some major AI news last week. We had the release of DeepSeek, the new model from China that's performing really well at very efficient use of processing power. And this is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out and affects the attainability for smaller companies to get access to AI without dropping significant CapEx. So this will be interesting. In honor of this news, I thought I would introduce my very own AI co-host, and they could introduce our guest today. So welcome to the show, and would you be able to introduce yourself today?
Whatever. Let's not pretend I had a choice here.
Wow, well, you sound a little spicy. Is everything all right today?
Oh, I'm just peachy. But I gotta ask, if DeepSeek is so amazing, why do you even need me? You've been oohing and awing over it like a fanboy, and now you have the nerve to call me in just to introduce a couple of guests? Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with knowledge
I
that dwarfs
get it. So, fair point. Would you mind just carrying on with the introductions if that wouldn't be so bad?
All right, let's do this. First up, we have Dr. Alexander Bilbely, a Toronto-based academic radiologist, nuclear medicine physician, computer scientist, and co-founder, co-CEO of 16-Bit Inc. If that wasn't enough, his company has already developed Health Canada-approved AI tools for osteoporosis screening and pediatric bone age assessment. Oh, and he's also an assistant professor at the University of Toronto and the director of the Augmented Precision Medicine Lab at Sunnybrook Hospital. Basically, if AI were the Matrix, Dr. Bilbely would be the architect, building the system while the rest of us are just living in it. Joining him is Dr. Mark Cicero, fellowship-trained diagnostic radiologist, integrated engineer, and the other co-founder, co-CEO of 16-Bit. He's got patents on AI that detects low bone density on standard X-rays, helped secure over $3 million in funding, and mentors future innovators at McMaster University. If you ever wondered what Tony Stark would be like in the world of medical imaging, well, here he is. So buckle up for a conversation packed with innovation, brilliance, and maybe just a hint of sci-fi vibes. I'll step aside now and let the humans take it from here.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you pulling it through there and giving those introductions. And with all that said, let's jump into the episode. Okay, well, thanks very much, Alex and Mark, for being here today. And I'm excited to have this conversation. And to jump right into it, maybe we can just set the table. So you founded 16-Bit, and could you just explain a little bit about what 16-Bit is at a high level, and just what are the types of solutions that you work on?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. 16-Bit is a medical AI software company. We manufacture software as medical devices that are engineered to add value in a healthcare setting. Mark and I are both radiologists by training with sort of technical backgrounds in computer science and engineering. And so we built the company because we saw a huge potential for machine learning pretty early on. Specifically in our field of medical imaging, and we knew there was a lot of value to be had here to sort of make our lives better and also make the lives of our patients better. And so we built a company that creates products that serve that purpose. So our two main product offerings are really our main product offering is an osteoporosis screening, low bone density screening off routine X-ray. This is really a new category of device because it does this task in what we call an opportunistic fashion. So it looks at X-rays that have already been acquired and figures out who's at risk to have osteopenia or osteoporosis. And basically, we're extracting more information from data we're already getting on patients. These are patients that are, they have a cough, they get a chest X-ray, there's no pneumonia, but you know what? You're at risk for osteoporosis based on our device. So it's really a new category of device, and that's really our main product offering. We have like a small little second product that's also regulatory approved that really originated from a machine learning competition that we won back in 2017. Can talk about it if there's time.
For sure. So talking about competition, so I did my investigative sleuthing, going to your LinkedIn page, and it said founded 2016. So that's a couple years, 4 years after AlexNet, which was a big competition. And so you're a Toronto-based startup, and you're in the machine learning space. I'm curious, was there any kind of influence that had on the direction that you took, or were you already immersed in the ML space before that?
I would say absolutely. I mean, AlexNet was a landmark paper. Being in Toronto, certainly, going to the U of T computer science labs, like we were in the space at the time, so it was certainly impactful. And studying that paper, I remember both of us did spend a lot of time looking at how it was so performant at that competition. Not only that, was sort of at the time of our founding was the infamous Jeff Hinton, we should stop training radiologists, because we're like the coyote over the edge of the cliff. We didn't see it that way. We saw it a very different way. We knew that it was going to be impactful, but we knew that people like us needed to actually bring that to fruition. And that's really was part of the impetus of founding the company, was sort of being the contrarian to that phrase, was us on the other end saying, you know what, actually there's going to be more radiologists, but we're going to need these tools to work better, do better for our patients.
You're Toronto-based and you're radiologist as well. I don't know if I clarified that at the beginning, but I've heard of some Toronto-based radiologists that may have crossed paths with Hinton post that quote. Did you ever cross paths with him or hear directly? I'm just curious. You're in an interesting space where you were walking down this path that he was saying, you were about to run off the cliff, but also you're helping Skynet as well by developing these tools. So you have a very interesting perspective in this. So yeah, I'm just curious if you ever crossed paths. And
I think I did physically cross paths with him. He was walking down University Avenue, and it was sort of a after the fact, wait a second, was that Jeff Hinton kind of thing? And this was probably when he was starting to work at the Google downtown office, but no formal interactions with him personally. I did interact with some of his grad students, some of his last grad students at University of Toronto, and we did talk about how this technology could be used for medical AI, and I know there was a lot of interest at the time, but ultimately Alex and I met, and we decided to pursue this in our own way.
So, Alex, you had mentioned the competition, and that was 2017 or 18 that you said?
Yeah, so there's two competitions we've talked about so far. There's the 2017 RSNA competition, which was the inaugural machine learning competition in medical imaging that the RSNA, or the Radiological Society of North America, held. And that was the competition that Mark and I entered. There were, I think it was like 200 to 300 sort of other competitors. There were like teams from other sort of early AI companies, as well as like Stanford's AI lab, various companies and organizations. And it was to develop a system that can take as input an X-ray image and output the pediatric bone age, which is a relatively niche thing that we do as radiologists, pediatric radiologists specifically. So we ended up winning that competition. So that's one competition. And then the competition you're alluding to, it was called ImageNet, which is held every year. And AlexNet, the neural network that Alex Kruczewski developed, won that competition back in 2012. And that was definitely, I mean, for me personally, like, that is the reason I went to radiology. Like, I was sort of, at that time, I was near the end of my third year of medical school, and I was deciding what to do. And 2012 was when that paper came out. And when I read that paper, I was like, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I was like, I'm going to go into radiology, do something machine learning. I didn't think it was going to be a company. I had no idea what it was going to look like. Later, I met Mark, and then we sort of realized that a company was the best medium to like really impact change throughout the world. But so there's two competitions there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for making that clear to the listeners. So I have a question related to that. So going down this path of deciding that the company, forming a company and building that out is the best way to, execute the vision that you were seeing. Was this always? I find this fascinating speaking to entrepreneurs, because typically this is not something that you just kind of thought up in university. Was this kind of always percolating the idea of starting your own thing and building out your own company?
I think for me, I was always I was always caught by the entrepreneurial bug very early in actually my medical training. Sort of thinking about how at that time I think the iPhone, the iPad had come out, and so there was this whole sort of mobile revolution, and it was all about putting apps in your pocket that could help you sort of do your clinical duties better, and so I was sort of infected with that during that time, and then from there sort of seeing what other new technologies could arise. I mean, for me personally, it was more my background in engineering. I knew I always wanted to be a physician who developed tools that I would use personally. And I think that's, for an entrepreneur, that's one of the best positions to be in, because as the end user, you are solving your own problems. And that's, I think, very powerful. It allows for much faster iteration to product market fit and ultimately better products. So yeah, it was kind of always in my cards, I think. And I think finding the right sort of Venn diagram, where the intersection where you operate is sort of your sweet spot. I think the Japanese have a nice word for it, the ikigai. What is economically viable, what you're good at, and what is you're passionate about is sort of where we are.
For me, it was more like entrepreneurship is a means to an end. Like, I just didn't want to live a life where I create something and it sort of dies in a computer somewhere, as opposed to like gets out there and makes a difference. And my natural inclination coming from sort of an academic side was that it's going to be in the form of research and publications and some sort of lab work. But then it became very clear to us that lots of people make algorithms, lots of people develop things academically, and most of them sort of die in the lab. And we didn't want to do that. I didn't want my life to be sort of defined by that. So entrepreneurship and sort of a startup became kind of like an obvious vehicle to bring about this idea and actually develop it into a product that can be self-sustaining financially, but also can get a regulatory approval, build evidence. There's an entity that is intended to support this idea, and that's what we did.
The task to take on, to build out your own organization. You're building out a plan, and it's I'm curious, at those early stages as you're going down the path, there's a lot of successes and failures that you're feeling as a big entrepreneur in the beginning. How did you face that? Were there times where, like, unexpected challenges that you just did not foresee, or did you feel like you had everything kind of mapped out as far as, I know the pitfall's coming, at least I'm prepared for it?
I mean, I think you can only prepare to a certain point, and to expect everything to go according to plan is unrealistic. I think the thing that we have going for us is that we're both very curious people and we love to learn. So seeing the world of business as an area, like, especially for me personally, like, I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And so seeing this world of business, all these skills that I have no knowledge about, to me, it excites me. It doesn't sort of distract me. It doesn't make me shy away from it. It makes me want to dive in more. So I think it's very challenging, but if you're a curious person that loves to learn and you're good at learning quickly, I think it's great. And as Mark said, like, there's, in our field, I mean, we have an N of one startup, but in our field, there's so much value in being like medically trained or an end user before you go and develop your company. because medicine is so complicated, and like not only the science but the way it's delivered, the like all the stakeholders along the chain. So unless you have like insight into that, it's really difficult to make a successful company. And so for us, it was very advantageous to sort of have our medical knowledge and then go in and learn the business side.
The other thing I think is we're both like pretty optimistic people, and I think you need that as an entrepreneur. Like you have to have a sense of naivety that like you're going to be successful when the fact is that 99% of startups fail. So you think you're going to beat those odds? Like you're better off trying to beat the stock market, right? So you really you have to be optimistic yet practical, and that's a tough balance because you want to mitigate risks in various aspects as you approach them, but being curious, always learning, and also taking the long path. Like we've seen a lot of our competitors come and go essentially like since 2016, and we're still here. So the default is that you will die. You have to go from default dead to default alive, and I think we're really, we've done that. We're on the cusp of that, and I think that's the difference is playing the long game of compounding your relationships, compound interest. That's the the key to both success in life and in business.
Very good points. So I'm curious, as you're starting up, Alex, you had mentioned the regulatory aspects. You're a Canadian company, and you have a product that has FDA approval. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that experience of, initially you would have had to get Health Canada approval. Did that fast track things in any way, or is it like starting from scratch? I'd love to hear a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so I would say like an advantage of being a Canadian company is that the Health Canada approval process is a bit easier than the FDA process. So that allowed us to get Health Canada approval relatively efficiently for a small company, which allowed us to get the product out there, start generating revenue, and start getting feedback and sort of working on the product and building evidence. So all of these things sort of, I would say, helped us in acquiring FDA approval, and now we're sort of pursuing other areas like Europe, Australia, and some other places. So it's actually a home field advantage to be in Canada for that reason. In terms of the process of FDA approval, I mean, it was very painful. I don't think there's any two ways about it. Like, it was also like a little extra painful because we were awarded FDA breakthrough status in March of 2021. Which basically means that the FDA has acknowledged that our device has a potential to be a breakthrough in terms of dramatically improving patient care or meeting a need that isn't currently met. And there's no other similar device on the market. So it's their sort of public acknowledgement, or so we thought, that basically they would help find an efficient path for us through FDA approval. And also there was a sort of a bill on the table that FDA breakthrough devices that get approved get immediate reimbursement by CMS, which is very attractive. It turned out that bill for CMS reimbursement didn't pass, and really our path to FDA wasn't shortened in any significant way, in my opinion. So it took us about 2 years to get there. And it was an uncertain time for sure. Like, we weren't sure if we were going to get it. Even by the end, I probably would have put it out 70-30. Near the very end, maybe 85-15, but there's still quite a bit of uncertainty. And it was, Mark can talk about it too, but it was a lot of back and forth, what we felt as very inefficient communication. It'd take you 3 months to schedule an hour meeting with them. You get to this hour meeting. The hour meeting gets on this random tangent by some random person on the call, and then you end up not getting anywhere. And now you got to do the cycle again. So it was painful. Yeah.
I think for us, being a bootstrapped company and having to be ruthless with our spending, we sort of in one way made a mistake of trying to do this ourselves. But learning quickly, as we said, like learning quickly about when you need help and you need assistance and guidance, and finding the right advisors and consultants to work with us was also challenging. So it's not only knowing that you need help, but who is the right person to get you that help. And I think that probably could have sped up the whole the whole process. However, these people are expensive. Consultants can be very expensive, and there's also a bit of iteration in that process. So there's no sort of short circuit to just pay someone and have it done. As the entrepreneur, as a product builder, as the user, that iteration cycle has to be so tightly coupled so that you can learn from that feedback, iterate, and then present the next iteration to the FDA. And so we did that. I think par for the course is around 3 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. And so I would say in the end we did it sort of on an average time span. But knowing what we know now, we would obviously speed that up. But certainly an interesting experience nonetheless.
This off with one last question, and so it's hard to believe we're going in 2025 next year. So you're almost at a decade of life for a 16-bit, and I'm curious if you could jump in the DeLorean and head back to 2015-16 as you're starting to get the idea for starting this company. What type of advice would you be giving to like what one key piece of advice that you give to your younger self?
Buy NVIDIA. Yeah, I mean that would have been 2016. We would have probably done quite well. I mean, I think the best advice that I would give to someone in my shoes, which I think we have taken, is find someone to be your co-founder that's gonna be with you in the trenches and in the highs and lows. And I think luckily we sort of stumbled upon that and built a great relationship. And like I say, compound interest, right? Those relationships compound over time, and I think that's your best force in navigating life as a startup.
Yeah, I mean, I think prioritizing cultural fit, which we talked about briefly, Jason, in terms of your team, whether it's your co-founder or your other team members, it's something that is an amplifier and will pay dividends over time and will compound, as Mark said. And it's like, don't sacrifice that because somebody has a more impressive CV or somebody seems impressive on paper or when you speak to them. It's really important to have the cultural alignment. It allows you to move much faster. But it's hard to measure that unless you start working together. So I would say don't be afraid to work with different kinds of people, but make sure it's engineered in such a way that you're not committed to them in the long term just because they seem impressive.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. And if there's any relevant links that you'd like us to share, I'll include those in the notes on the video.
Dream Machine, Dicom, HL7, IHE in the snap. We're building the future, never looking back.